This is video 3.2 of the Blender 3 course. And this one handles about basic meshes, adding basic meshes and editing basic meshes. When you start Blender, you have this default cube, and as you may have already found out, there are two main modes that you can be in. The first one is object mode and the other one is edit mode. Now object mode means that you can manipulate the entire mesh at once. You can move it, you can scale it, or you can rotate it any which way you like, but everything you do always handles the object itself, the whole thing. Now you can see that there is this orange point at the very center of your object. That is a most important thing. It's called the object origin, and that represents your object. When Blender gives you a mesh, it actually gives you the origin point, and then it gives you 8 vertices around that origin. Now the reason I bring up origin is that every object has an origin, and they are very important when you start snapping meshes together, for example, or aligning them. So you need to be aware of this object origin here. Now when you move the object as a whole, the origin moves with the object. But if you are in edit mode, which you can reach by either pressing the tab key or by using this drop down in here, and you select everything and you move your object, as you can see, the origin remains where it was. Now if you now rotate your object without changing your pivot point, which is the point around which things will happen, you will actually be rotating the cube around the object origin, which is in the place where it was before. So as a whole, it can be said that you do not want to move your entire mesh while you are in edit mode, because the origin will be left behind. So let me do a couple of quick re-insertions there. When you want to add a new thing and you are in object mode, all you have to do is to press Shift A to get a list of things you can insert. Your basic list that is always available will be the first list that here that says add. All of these are here for you. You want to add a mesh, they're here, a curve, they're all here, a surface, they're here, metaballs, I have to say I've never used these, text, volume, again never used, grease pencil for making notes inside your scene. An armature is a bunch of bones or a rigging. If you create a human person, for example, you need to add an armature or a rig to be able to animate it. Lattice is just a grid, basically. Empties are good. Empties are points in space that are represented by plain axes, arrows, single arrows, or the other ones down here. I usually add a one with plain axis. When you scale that, you can see, or I'll just hide this cube for a while. You can see that I now have an object in here, and I can move the object, and it is a point in space, and I can snap my cursor into that point by saying Shift S, cursor to selected, and now my cursor is at the origin of my empty object. The empty objects will never show in your renders, but you can use them as placekeepers. You can snap objects to the empties by snapping the 3D cursor to them first. So that's why we need empties in our scenes. I'll delete that though, and snap my cursor to the world origin and show you the list of stuff you can add. A cube is a plane is just a plane, has nothing but 4 vertices and a gray face to it. This is sometimes necessary, for example, to make a floor. You just insert one and scale it by 100, and you have a floor for your scene as big as you need, and all the other stuff will be then placed on that floor. Or you can go in here and you can add a cube. This is much more often used. You can create so much out of a cube. Even a human head, I'm told, I've never done this, but I'm told that if you take a cube and you add a subdivision surface to it with, twice, like so, this is what you use to start sculpting a human head. I've never done this. I fully admire people who are able to do sculpting in Blender, but if you want to try, this is probably the best place to start. Then you have a circle, and this is actually rather interesting because when you add a circle down here, you have some settings that you can use. You can, for example, take it down so that you have a triangle, square. You can make it a hexagon. This would be a 7 heptagon, octagon, nonagon, and this is a decagon actually. So you can make it as refined as you need. The thing is that if you want it to be really, really square, sorry, not square, but really round, you need to go to about 100 vertices. But if you just need it to be something like roundish, you can add maybe the basic 32 is good. The radius allows you to set the radius, which would be the distance between the origin and the edge. And the fill type is important. You can add it with nothing. It's just a line, or you can add an n-gon, which will give you a solid face, or you can give yourself a triangle fan. And the triangle fan looks like this when you go into edit mode. So you can already see that it has these triangles, which you can then touch with or select by just hitting the shift key and going into face mode, like so. And if you want to extrude those, this is where you are. So actually this happens every time you add something that you can edit. As for the vertices, so if I go Shift A and I go to my cylinder, you can also see that it now has 32 vertices. It has a radius of 1 meter and a depth of 2. So if you want to have it one by one, you can make it so. And of course, because this is a radius, not diameter, it's like 2 meters across and 1 meter high. Also here you can set the ends to be either n-gons or solid faces, or you can make them to be triangle fans, whatever you need. Also, by the way, see how the options disappear once you go into edit mode. So it's in here that you need to decide what kind of cylinder you want to make. If you don't want it to have any cap, you can do it like so, and then you can add the number of vertices in it. Triangle again. You see how it's going. But this is actually important in the sense that if you want to print a cylinder, then it's a good idea to give it a triangle fan and at least 100 vertices. Because the accuracy of our printers is so good that if you make it with 32 vertices, your object will actually not feel round. It will feel like it had 32 sides. So for printing purposes you need a lot of vertices, but for modeling purposes not that necessary. The next thing we have in the list is two types of spheres. The UV sphere is what you could expect to see. It looks like a golf ball, and it has 32 segments or more segments. You can add segments like so, and you can make it look rather weird if you make the number of rings 4 and 4. But if you add more segments to it, you get the point. So this would be a basic Earth type of model. If you wanted to model the Earth, this would be a good starting point for that. The next one is a slightly different thing. It's an icosphere, and the icosphere is different in the sense that the previous one consists of squares, but this one consists of triangles. And it has one less subdivision type you can make, but you can still make it look rather interesting. And again, if you give it like 3 subdivisions, this would already be very, very smooth if you printed this. So they have different uses, these two types of objects, the icosphere and the so this is how an extruded icosphere looks. I don't actually know what you would use this for, but if you ever need one, that's how you make them. A cone is a cylinder that only has one vertex at the very top, but you can, in here you can affect it. You can make it into a cut cone, or you can make it a full cone, or you can make it a cylinder, whatever you like. So that's how you use that one. Again, you have a fill type for the top, and we then have a torus, which is your basic donut type of thing. You have 2 radiuses, one of the major radius. How big is the this is the relation between the diameter and the diameter of the slice of the torus you see there, and the minor radius is the thickness of the slice. Again, you have segments that you can make. You can make a really funny looking stuff by just playing with the settings of the torus. But again, as soon as you go into edit mode, you don't have access to those settings anymore, so be careful about when you go into edit mode. The grid is just a grid. A monkey. This is Suzanne. This is the hero from the first animated movie that was ever made using Blender, and that's why we have a monkey as a primitive. In all the other 3D programs that I'm aware of, you have a primitive called the teapot, because in the University of Utah, in the States, the first ever object to be modeled in 3D geometry was a teapot. But in Blender we have Suzanne. Again, you can set its size from here, and rotation, location, whatever. But when you go into edit mode, you can see that it actually consists of squares and some triangles. Again, I haven't used Suzanne that much, because having a monkey in your scene, well, you need to have a need for the monkey in your scene. So, but that's where you get it anyway. Then we have stuff that becomes available only after you go into the preferences, edit preferences, and in here seek for mesh. And in add mesh, you can, for example, add a bolt factory, and you need a 3D print toolbox if you go into 3D printing. You have a lot of different things. Mesh loop tools is actually very useful. I'll show you later in a different video how it works. But this is a good set of add-ons. So if I close my preferences, go into my mesh, I now have new stuff in here. I have the bolt menu. In here I can add a bolt, make it into a nut, and give it the presets. You know, there's the M series of nuts, and M10 nut is an M10 bolt, looks like that. And if I add another one by going into here and saying add bolt and make it into a nut and make sure that it is M10. Now I have a matching pair of nuts and bolts. The funny thing is that these are printable. If I went into here and I selected the faces up under here, like so, and then snap my cursor to them, cursor to selected, go into object mode, object, set origin to 3D cursor. I can then rotate along the x-axis for 180. And now I can snap the cursor to world origin, then snap the selection to cursor and move it on the y direction. And this would give me two objects which are smack on the XY 0 or the Z 0, so they would be on the printing surface. And I could export these into an STL file and then print these on our 3D printer if I needed like a palm-sized bolt and nut. I can actually do that by just going in here, adding those and exporting and printing. And also, by the way, if you go in here and Shift A bolt and you take a bolt, you can set all the parameters of this tool. You can give it like more thread or less thread just by pulling it here, and you can do everything you need to do to your bolts before you go into edit mode or before you click out of this. You have access to all of those extra things in there. So yes, this would be, there's also gears. You can make a gear, looks like that. Scale it a little. Before scaling it, actually, let me add a gear. And again here I can edit the number of teeth, the radius of the object, the width of the object, the base of the object. I can make this into a 0 actually, or like so. And all of these, I don't actually know that much about making gears. I have made some gears and printed the gears as well. But with this tool you can create whatever set of gears you may ever need. Then we have different types of diamonds, pipe joints. A Y-joint pipe looks like this. Again, this is something that is not used every day, but might be very useful. If you were, for example, to design a house with complete plumbing and everything, you could do this. Or if you needed to print something like this, you could then go and add some thickness to it. And this would print already very nicely. The other set of stuff that you have in here is curves. But I haven't used curves that much, but I know that they are very useful. And if you need a curve, you can go in here and edit it, scale it, give the object origin to its geometry. And if you go into edit mode, you can pick any of the vertices and extrude from here, rotate like so, grab it on the Z, extrude some more, and when you select it and you go into the curves, then you can give it some geometry, and if you go to so you can turn it into a real object like so, make it a pipe, for example. But you can still go in here and select the vertex and move it around, and all the other vertices will move with it. So curves are interesting if you need the curves for something. So that's basically what you do when you add a curve. The NURBS curves are even more interesting or tough to use, but there are use cases for those if you need any of those, but I'm not sure when you would use those. Surfaces, metaballs, text is good. You can go in here and add text. Go into edit mode, Blender Rocks. Go back into object mode, and we are now here in the text tab, and you can either not offset it, that is not what I wanted, but to extrude it, and now you have a 3D text. You can also select the font for this thing when you are in edit mode. Actually, even when you are not in edit mode, just go into your font selection, Windows fonts, and pick any font that you might like, and now you have a different font for this. So yes, text is very easy to use, and you can, since you know this is a curve, this is a subset of curves at the moment, but so you can actually use the same modifiers for it as you would use for curves. But if you need to print it, for example, then you need to make that into a mesh. You right click on it and you convert that into a mesh, and now your text is a mesh. And now you can use all the same tools as you would use for any mesh. That is text. What else? I explained the empty. Okay, an image is for when you want to edit something, you want to create a mesh that is based on an image. You can bring the image in as a background or as a reference photo. These will all be explained in better detail in the upcoming videos. But just import an image into the background and it will appear where the cursor is, and then you can start to model on top of that image. It's very useful. You can add as many lights as you need, as many cameras you need. Force fields, this is really interesting in the sense that Blender has physics. You can add a wind, for example, or you can add a magnetic force to it, or you can add a pushing force, whatever you need, fluid flow, turbulence. Voids are virtual birds. So you have no idea how deep Blender is when you start looking into it. So this would be all your introduction into adding a mesh. The only thing you need to remember is that you have access to these specific settings down here on the bottom left corner until you go into edit mode or you click outside the object and lose focus, and that's when that object disappears. Right, let's go on to something else.